Tonight on Fear Knocks, we're walking the halls after quiet hours. Floor lights dimmed, laundry still warm, duty logs opened to pages that shouldn't exist. These 10 stories come from resident assistants, night maintenance, campus police, and students who kept the tapes. Late fall into winter, Midwest to Mid-Atlantic. Concrete towers and brick quads that hold heat by day and whispers by 3 a.m. You'll hear card readers acknowledge IDs no longer active, dryers cycle with doors open, and voices respond from stairwells that never lead anywhere. There's human mischief in here, and a little weather, and a few things nobody signed for. Subscribe and hit the bell. If you ever pulled a midnight round, this one's for you. These are real places. Listen close. Drop your own story below. All right, let's get into it. I've been a senior resident advisor for 7 years now, across 3 different university campuses. Each institution has its own quirks, its own brand of student mischief, but the underlying protocols for residential safety remain consistent. My current post is a large, older residence hall, built in the late 60s, a sprawling concrete and brick structure with 4 wings and a labyrinth of service corridors. It's the kind of building where sound carries, especially on a long weekend, when most of the student population has cleared out. The silence can be profound, almost heavy. This particular Friday, the silence was broken. It was just past 2300 hours. My shift began at 2200. A standard patrol of the main common areas, laundry rooms, and perimeter doors. The building's occupancy was down to about 15% for the holiday. I was in the main office, finishing the last entry on my incident log for a minor noise complaint from earlier, when the first series of knocks registered. They weren't loud, but they were distinct. 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 3 more. Not the random thumps of a building settling or the distant clang of a pipe. These were deliberate. The sound seemed to emanate from the south stairwell, an area that usually sees minimal traffic, even during peak hours. My initial thought was a late-arriving student, perhaps locked out or confused. It happens. I checked the main security monitor, pulling up the feed for the south stairwell entrance. The camera, mounted above the fire door leading to the exterior, showed an empty concrete landing. No one was visible. I waited, watching the live feed. After about 90 seconds, the knocks came again, identical in rhythm and intensity. Rap, rap, rap. Pause. Rap, rap, rap. The sound was definitely coming from inside the stairwell, not the exterior. My protocol for unexplained noises is direct. Investigate. I grabbed my master keycard and my handheld radio. Dispatch, this is RA Unit 1, checking a noise complaint. South stairwell, Section C. Possible student lockout. Copy, RA Unit 1. Logged. Dispatch's voice was crisp, professional. Standard procedure. The service corridor leading to the south stairwell is a utilitarian space, stark fluorescent lights humming overhead. The old linoleum floor clicking under my regulation-issue shoes. The air was noticeably cooler here, a perpetual draft seeping from the concrete walls. As I approached the fire door, the knocks repeated. They were clearer now, echoing off the bare walls, originating from the interior side of the heavy metal door. It wasn't a student trying to get in. It was someone trying to get out, or at least get attention from within. I paused at the door, listening. The knock stopped as I reached it. I pressed my ear to the cold metal. Nothing. I tried the handle. Locked, as it should be. The door was a heavy, fire-rated assembly, designed to seal tightly. But something was off. Along the seam where the door met the frame, just below the latch, I saw it. A thin, white plastic zip tie, freshly cut. The ends were still sharp, not dulled by age or wear. And next to it, a faint, sticky residue. The unmistakable ghost of industrial-grade adhesive tape. My initial assumption of a simple lockout evaporated. Zip ties and tape residue on a fire door are not standard student behavior. This wasn't a prank. This was an attempt to tamper with a critical safety feature. Someone had secured the door from the inside, then cut themselves free. Or, more unsettling, someone had secured it to prevent entry, then cut it, leaving the evidence behind. I radioed dispatch again. Dispatch, RA Unit 1, update. South stairwell fire door shows evidence of tampering. Fresh zip tie cut and tape residue. Requesting a security officer for a sweep of the stairwell. Copy, RA Unit 1. Security Unit 2 is on patrol in the North Quad. ETA 10 minutes. 10 minutes. The stairwell was a confined space, concrete from top to bottom, with access to all 4 floors of the building. I decided against entering alone until security arrived. My mistake, perhaps, was not immediately understanding the implications of the freshness of the residue. I should have considered it a more immediate threat rather than waiting. My judgment was likely dulled by the late hour and the general quiet of the long weekend. I stood by the door, listening. A faint metallic scent in the air, perhaps from the cut plastic, or just the old building itself. While I waited, I pulled out my tablet and accessed the archived camera footage for the south stairwell. I rewound to 5 minutes before the first knocks. The frame was empty. Then, at 22:58 hours, a figure appeared, moving swiftly from left to right across the landing, heading towards the fire door. They were wearing a dark hoodie, the hood pulled low, obscuring their face. I could only make out a profile, a glimpse of a chin. Then they were past the camera's view. They didn't seem to interact with the door on camera. I fast-forwarded. At 2315, the camera lens began to fog. Not a slow, creeping mist, but a sudden, opaque cloud, like breath on cold glass. It started from the bottom left of the frame and spread rapidly, obscuring the entire view within seconds. The timestamp continued to advance, but the image was nothing but a milky whiteout. It remained like that for the next 3 minutes. Then slowly, the fog receded, revealing the empty landing once more. My stomach tightened. I'd seen camera malfunctions before, but never like this. It wasn't a glitch in the feed. It was a physical obscuration of the lens itself. And the timing, precisely when the knock started, was too coincidental. Security Unit 2. A young officer named Jensen arrived a few minutes later. He was thorough, checking each floor of the stairwell, top to bottom. The emergency exit bars were intact. No signs of forced entry or exit from the exterior. No one was found inside. He noted the cut zip tie and residue. "Nothing, RA Unit 1. Clear," he reported over the radio, his voice echoing slightly from the stairwell. "Did you notice anything unusual, officer?" I asked, stepping into the stairwell now that it was cleared. The air was still cool, the concrete walls stark. I remembered a summer job stocking shelves in a deserted grocery store, the quiet broken only by the hum of the freezers. That quiet had been benign. This was not. Just the usual empty stairwell vibe, R.A. Why? I showed him the tablet, the footage of the figure, then the sudden, unexplained fogging. He leaned in, his brow furrowed. "That's odd. Never seen that before. Looks like someone breathed right on the lens." "From where?" I asked, pointing to the camera's elevated position. "No one could reach that without a ladder." He shrugged, clearly unsettled. "Could be a temperature differential, I guess. Or maybe a faulty lens heater." But his voice lacked conviction. He took photos of the door and the footage. Dispatch logged the incident as unexplained activity, south stairwell, with a note about the door tampering and camera anomaly. There was no name attached to the incident, no identified party, just the evidence of a presence that defied explanation. The knocks didn't resume that night. The next morning, the zip tie remnant and tape residue were gone. The door was clean. I checked the camera logs for the entire night. Nothing. No figure, no fogging. Just an empty stairwell, silent and still. But the memory of those deliberate knocks, and the image of that lens clouding like a breath on glass remains. Sometimes, late at night, when the building settles and the wind whistles through the old brickwork, I listen for them. And I wonder who, or what, was trying to get my attention from the other side of that fire door. I've been a night custodian for this district for 17 years. Most of that time is spent in silence, moving through empty school buildings. The only sounds the whisper of my cartwheels and the distant hum of HVAC units. I know these buildings better than I know my own home. Every creak, every draft, every hidden service panel. My shift starts at 10 p.m., long after the last student and teacher have gone, and ends just before dawn. It's a solitary job, but it comes with a certain peace, a rhythm, and a heavy responsibility. One of the most critical systems I monitor are the carbon monoxide detectors. Every building has them, wired into the main alarm panel, constantly sampling the air. They're usually silent, a silent guardian. When one chirps, it's never good. Tonight, the call came in just after midnight from the elementary school. A CO alarm in the basement laundry room. I was already in the building, finishing up the gym. I grabbed my handheld CO meter from the office, a small yellow device, calibrated monthly, my most important tool for these kinds of calls. The school's basement is a labyrinth of old pipes and concrete, a different world from the brightly painted classrooms above. The laundry room is tucked away at the far end, past the boiler room and the main electrical vault. As I approached, I could hear it. A distinct, high-pitched chirp, not continuous but intermittent. It sounded like a bird caught in a vent, a sharp, metallic cry that cut through the usual low thrum of the building's systems. The sound was synchronized. Chirp. Silence. Chirp. Silence. I realized it was chirping between the tumbles of the large commercial dryer. The heavy machine would spin, then pause, and in that brief lull the alarm would sound. My handheld meter read 0 ppm in the hallway. I pushed open the heavy laundry room door. The air inside was warm, humid, and carried the faint scent of stale detergent. The alarm on the wall, A small white box flashed a red light with each chirp. My meter immediately registered 12 ppm. Low, but definitely present. Standard protocol for a dryer-related CO alarm is to ventilate the area and check the exhaust. I walked over to the dryer, a massive industrial unit that could handle dozens of towels at once. It was still running, tumbling a load of forgotten uniforms. I propped the dryer door open, thinking a little extra airflow might help clear any minor exhaust backup. I figured it was just a bit of lint impeding the vent, causing a temporary buildup. A common enough occurrence. I moved to the exterior wall where the dryer's exhaust pipe exited the building. Outside, in the cool night air, I could see the metal vent cover. It was partially obscured by a thick, matted layer of lint and dust, like a gray beard. I pulled on my work gloves and began to clear it away, scraping the damp, fibrous material into a plastic bag. It was a satisfying, if grimy, task. I remembered helping my grandfather clear the lint trap on his old wringer washer when I was a kid. A simple, tangible problem with a simple, tangible solution. This felt similar. I cleared the vent completely, ensuring a clear path for exhaust. Returning inside, I expected the chirping to stop. It didn't. The alarm continued its rhythmic cry, still peaking between tumbles. My handheld meter now showed 18 ppm. Higher. And then I felt it. A faint, warm breath on my face, coming from the now clear exhaust vent. It wasn't pushing air out. It was pulling air in. A backdraft. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just a clogged vent. This meant negative pressure in the building, and that was a far more serious issue. Carbon monoxide, an invisible killer, was being drawn into the building, not expelled. The source of negative pressure often lies in the mechanical rooms. I headed for the adjacent boiler room, a much larger space that housed the school's main heating system, 2 large natural gas furnaces, and 3 commercial water heaters. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead seemed louder in here, a low, buzzing drone that always gave me a slight headache. The air felt heavy, still. My handheld meter, which had been fluctuating, now climbed steadily as I moved deeper into the room. 25 ppm, 30 ppm. Near the exhaust flues of the furnaces, it spiked to 45 ppm. I checked the main alarm panel, located just outside the boiler room door. The laundry room CO detector was still showing active. I followed the protocol. I pressed the acknowledge button, silencing the chirping for a moment, then the reset button, hoping to clear the fault and get a fresh reading. The panel went quiet. For a brief moment, the building felt utterly still, the silence almost oppressive. Then, the panel lit up again. Not the laundry room detector this time. A different zone. Mechanical room, water heater 2. And my handheld meter, which I still held, now showed a peak of 60 ppm. Not near the main furnace flues, but near an older, smaller water heater in the corner that I hadn't initially suspected. It was a unit that wasn't typically under heavy load, often only used as a backup. It hadn't even been running when I first came down. The initial problem, the dryer, had cleared, but it had merely unmasked a deeper, more pervasive issue. A ghost in the machine. The system was failing in a way I hadn't encountered before, shifting the point of failure, almost like it was trying to hide. I called the supervisor, relaying the sequence of events. The backdraft, the rising CO levels, the alarm shifting from the dryer to an unexpected water heater. His voice was grim. "Shut down the gas mains to that entire section of the basement, immediately," he instructed. "We'll get a technician out first thing in the morning." I found the main gas shutoff valve, a large red handle, and turned it clockwise until it was tight. The hum of the furnaces died. The pilot lights on the water heaters extinguished. The mechanical room fell into a profound silence, broken only by the distant, almost imperceptible thrum of the building's remaining systems. My handheld meter, however, still registered 15 ppm, a lingering presence in the air, even after the gas supply was cut. It was a low reading, but persistent. The cold, dead machines stood like silent sentinels, and the invisible threat still lingered, a phantom. I left the basement, the air above ground feeling crisp and clean by comparison. But the unsettling quiet of the mechanical room stayed with me. I've been a campus dispatcher for 8 years. 8 years of late nights, caffeine, and the low hum of equipment in a windowless room. My console is a command center. 6 monitors displaying everything from campus security camera feeds to the CAD system, weather radar, and building schematics. To my right, the radio console, with its bank of glowing buttons and a speaker that carries the voices of our security officers, maintenance teams, and sometimes the local police. To my left, a dedicated scanner, constantly sweeping campus frequencies. It's usually just background noise, a white noise machine for the graveyard shift, picking up everything from groundskeeping chatter to student dorm calls on older, less secure frequencies. My job is about clarity and control. Every transmission is logged, every call precise. Dispatch to Unit 2. Confirm status at Northgate. Over. Unit 2 clear. Northgate secure. Over. That's the rhythm. It's what keeps a campus of 30,000 students safe and functional. We operate under strict protocols, clear call signs, concise messages, no unnecessary chatter. The radio is a lifeline, not a party line. And the scanner? It's a passive listener, a tool for situational awareness, never an active participant. It was a Tuesday night, just past 0200. The campus was quiet, save for the distant rumble of a delivery truck on the main road. I was checking the perimeter cameras, making sure the gates were all secured for the night. I keyed my mic, addressing the officer patrolling the central academic quad. Dispatch to Unit 4. Confirm all doors secured at the science hall. Over. A beat of static, then Unit 4's familiar voice. Unit 4, science hall clear, all doors secured. Moving to library annex. Over. I logged it. Standard. About 30 seconds later, a crackle from the scanner. My own voice, unmistakably but slightly muffled, played back. Dispatch to Unit 4. Confirm all doors secured at the science hall. Over. Room 312. I froze. Room 312? There's no room 312 in the science hall. It's a lecture hall building, mostly open spaces and labs. And why was it coming from the scanner? I checked the main radio console. No transmit light. My headset was firmly on my head. No hot mic. I leaned closer to the scanner, a faint smell of ozone from the old circuit board stinging my nose. Just static. I figured I was tired, maybe misheard something, or there was some bleed over from an old frequency. It happens sometimes, especially with older equipment. I'd been on shift for 10 hours, and the fluorescent lights were starting to give me a headache. A minor mistake, easily dismissed. An hour later, I was coordinating a routine maintenance check on a boiler in the arts building. Dispatch to Maintenance 1. Confirm access to boiler room in arts. Over. Maintenance 1. Confirmed. Accessing now. Over. Again, a short delay. Then, from the scanner, my voice. Dispatch to Maintenance 1. Confirm access to boiler room and arts. Over. Lounge C. This time, I was wide awake. The tone was identical, the phrasing exact. But Lounge C was entirely wrong. The arts building had several lounges, but none were boiler rooms. I pulled up the building schematics on my monitor. Nothing. This wasn't just bleed over. It was a mirror, distorted. I called the supervisor who lived off campus, explaining the anomaly. He sounded skeptical but promised to come in. While I waited, I started actively listening to the scanner, ignoring the other feeds for a moment. I made another call, a simple check-in with a patrol unit. Dispatch to Unit 7, status check, over. Unit 7, all clear. Patrol near Student Union, over. The scanner crackled and my voice returned, delayed, precise. Dispatch to Unit 7, status check, over. Study Lounge A. Study Lounge A. That was the main 24-hour study lounge in the Student Union building. I immediately pulled up the security camera feed for Study Lounge A. The room was mostly empty, just a few students hunched over laptops, bathed in the cool glow of their screens. In the corner, a large flat-screen TV was mounted on the wall. It was on, but displaying a no-signal message, a dead HDMI port. Yet, on my audio monitoring panel for that specific lounge, the meters were showing activity, spiking with each delayed playback from the scanner. The room was silent on the camera feed, but something was registering. The supervisor arrived, looking rumpled and unconvinced. I played back the recorded scanner audio, then showed him the live camera feed and the spiking audio meters. He watched, bewildered as I keyed the mic for a routine query to a different unit, then heard my own voice echo back from the scanner, specifying a room number that didn't exist, while the lounge's audio meter jumped. "It's like it's listening," he murmured, his skepticism replaced by genuine unease. "And then playing it back through what?" We checked the radio system thoroughly. No crosstalk, no open mics, no rogue transmitters on any campus frequency. Everything was operating within normal parameters. The supervisor called maintenance. 2 maintenance technicians arrived, looking equally confused by our explanation. We directed them to Study Lounge A. On the camera feed, I watched them examine the TV. They confirmed it was displaying no signal. They checked the back panel, the wiring. They even brought in a spectrum analyzer to check for any local RF emissions. "Dispatch," one of the technicians radioed back, his voice crackling with static. "This TV, it's just a monitor. It has no tuner installed. It can't receive broadcast signals. It's only meant for HDMI inputs, like a laptop or a presentation system. And there's nothing connected." "What about the audio?" I asked, watching the meters on my panel. They were still flickering intermittently, even as the technicians spoke. "No internal mic, no external speakers active," the technician replied. "It's dead quiet in here, except for the students." Yet, as he spoke, the scanner on my desk played back my earlier query. "Dispatch to Maintenance 1. Confirm access to boiler room and arts. Over. Lounge C." The audio meters for Study Lounge A spiked in perfect sync with the scanner's playback. The technicians found nothing. They cycled power on the TV, checked the junction boxes, even swapped out a network cable for the camera feed, thinking it might be a loopback. Nothing changed. The TV remained a blank screen. The room remained silent to the human ear. But the audio meters kept dancing, and the scanner kept playing my own words back to me, delayed, distorted by the wrong room numbers. We had to abandon protocol. The scanner, a vital monitoring tool, was disconnected from the main dispatch console's audio feed. We couldn't have critical communications being muddled by these phantom echoes. What was the source? RF bleed? Some impossible resonance? It defied explanation. The clear, concise radio calls I'd always relied on, calls like the one years ago when I helped a student find their lost dog, its happy yaps echoing through the radio, had always brought a sense of order. Now, that order was broken. Even now, months later, the scanner remains muted. But sometimes, late at night, when I walk across campus, past the silent, dark buildings, I swear I can hear it. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper on the edge of hearing, like an echo catching up to itself. A fragment of a question I asked hours or days ago, just out of reach, waiting for an answer I can't give. As a first-year student, my routine quickly solidified around the academic calendar. Most nights found me in the main library until closing, hunched over textbooks, the comforting, slightly musty scent of old paper and floor wax a constant companion. The quickest path back to my dorm was always through the old academic building, specifically its north stairwell, which usually emptied out by 10 p.m. Campus safety guidelines were clear. Report anything unusual, especially after dark, and never access sealed-off areas. The 13th floor of the academic building was one such area, a long-standing campus legend, a floor that didn't officially exist, supposedly sealed off decades ago due to structural issues, or maybe just superstition. One Tuesday night, a little after midnight, I was making my way down from the library's 4th floor. The building was silent, save for the hum of the ventilation system. I often used the stairs as a break from screens, a chance to clear my head. As I reached the 2nd floor landing, a distinct sound echoed from the north stairwell above me. Quick, light footsteps, ascending. Not heavy, deliberate strides, but a hurried, almost skittering pace. My initial thought was another student, maybe a late-night study group packing up. But the sound was too singular, too fast, and coming from an odd direction. Up the north stairs, which only led to the upper floors and the rumored sealed section. I paused, listening. The footsteps continued, rhythmic and urgent, pulling further away. I checked my watch. 12:17 a.m. No reason for anyone to be sprinting up those stairs at this hour. I was tired, probably a little overconfident from having just aced a midterm. Instead of heading straight out and reporting the noise to campus security, I decided to investigate. A classic first-year error of judgment, fueled by curiosity and a touch of late-night bravado. I pulled out my phone, switched on the flashlight, and started up the north stairwell, recording a quick video, just in case. The footsteps continued to recede, always just ahead, always just out of sight. I climbed, my own steps measured, trying to be quiet. The sound didn't diminish in volume, it simply moved further away. Past the 3rd, 4th, 5th floors. The air grew cooler, the building's ambient hum less noticeable. The emergency lights cast long, stark shadows. I kept my phone recording, angling it upwards, capturing the empty turns of the stairwell ahead. Then, abruptly, the footsteps stopped. Dead silence. I reached the 12th floor landing, my heart thumping a little harder now. The air was still. I took a deep breath and continued up the last flight. At the top, where the 13th floor should have been, was a solid, unpainted drywall patch. It stretched across the entire width of the stairwell, blocking access completely. No door frame, just a smooth, temporary-looking wall. The patch itself was new. The drywall compound was still a brighter white than the aged paint of the surrounding walls, and the tape seams were crisp. It looked like it had been put up very recently. I approached cautiously, shining my phone's light over the surface. The silence pressed in. I noticed something on the floor directly in front of the new drywall. A thin layer of fine construction dust. And in that dust, distinct imprints. Shoe prints. They were small, perhaps a size 7 or 8, and they showed clearly where someone had walked up to the drywall, paused, and then turned sharply, heading back down the stairs. The dust lines were sharp, undisturbed, suggesting the turn had been made very recently, within the last hour or so. The footsteps I'd heard had stopped exactly here. I stood there for a minute, processing. Someone had been here. Someone had come up to this newly sealed-off floor, turned around, and gone back down.
Why? And where had they gone? I hadn't heard anyone descend. I decided to review my phone video. I scrolled back, watching the ascent. The shaky footage showed each empty landing, the worn concrete steps, the dull institutional walls. I saw myself climb past the 11th floor, then the 12th. My phone's timestamp read 12:21 a.m. when I reached the sealed landing. I watched myself approach the drywall, the light from my phone illuminating the new patch and the dust lines. Then I saw it. In the video, as I took my final step onto the 13th floor landing, the camera, still pointed generally forward, registered something impossible. My physical presence stopped just before the dust lines, respecting the boundary of the turnaround. But the phone's camera, in that split second, seemed to capture one more step beyond where I physically stood. It showed the camera lens dipping slightly, as if my hand had continued to move forward, into the sealed space, for a fraction of a second. The view on the screen blurred, a brief flash of something dark and indistinct, before snapping back to the mundane reality of the drywall patch directly in front of me. I rewound the video, playing it again and again. Each time, the same anomaly. My body stopped, but the camera, for a microsecond, went one step further. It wasn't a glitch in the recording. The rest of the video was perfectly smooth. It was as if the phone, for a moment, had captured a space I couldn't physically occupy. A step into a dimension that wasn't there. The dust lines on the floor showed where I had stopped, where the previous person had stopped. But the video showed a momentary transgression of that boundary. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach, far worse than any jump scare. The footsteps, the sealed floor, the fresh dust marks, and now this impossible footage. It was a contradiction of physical reality, captured on my own device. I thought of playing hide and seek as a kid, the simple rules of boundaries and being out of bounds. Here the boundaries had been broken, not by me, but by the very act of recording. I stood there, phone in hand, the video paused on that impossible frame. The silence of the stairwell was no longer comforting, but oppressive. My initial plan to report the unusual activity seemed absurd now. What would I tell campus security? That my phone recorded a step into a floor that didn't exist? That I had followed phantom footsteps to a newly sealed wall, only to find evidence of someone else having been there, yet no one was there? The protocol for reporting strange occurrences didn't cover this. I couldn't even explain it to myself. I slowly backed away from the drywall, my eyes fixed on the patch, then turned and descended the stairs, not running, but moving with a deliberate urgency. The impossible image from my phone burned into my mind. I didn't look back. I've been an elevator technician for 15 years now.
certified for everything from hydraulic residential units to high-speed traction systems in downtown towers. My territory covers the sprawling commercial districts of the city's north side, a landscape of glass and steel where the vertical commute is as critical as the horizontal. My toolkit is standard issue. A Fluke multimeter, hoistway access keys, service panel overrides, and a laptop loaded with diagnostic software. I know these systems inside and out. The hum of the motors, the subtle vibration of the cables, the precise logic of their control boards. When something goes wrong, it's usually a mechanical failure, a worn component, a tripped breaker, or a sensor out of alignment. The digital brains behind it all are designed for precision, logging every event with atomic clock accuracy. That's the rule, the bedrock of my trade. The logs never lie. The call came in on a Tuesday afternoon, just as the sun was starting its descent, casting long shadows between the skyscrapers. Car 3 stalled between 12 and 13. Doors won't open. Passenger trapped. Standard stuff. A modern office building, 50-story, less than 10 years old. Its 4 high-speed cars are usually bulletproof. I grabbed my gear, radioed dispatch my ETA, and drove over. First stop, always, is the control room. It's a cool, quiet space, smelling faintly of ozone from the uninterruptible power supplies. Rows of monitors display real-time feeds from every camera, every sensor, every access point in the building. The Building Management System, BMS, is comprehensive, its master clock synchronized daily with NIST. I pulled up the elevator control panel for Car 3. Status: Perfect. Door lock fail. Below that, a red indicator for car stopped, inner floor. I accessed the event logs for Car 3, filtering for the last hour. The system showed the door lock fail, event initiated at 14:32:15. I scrolled down, expecting to see a series of attempts to cycle the doors, maybe an emergency stop command. Instead, the next log entry was door lock restored at 14:35:20, followed immediately by car resumed normal operation. I blinked. That was a 3-minute 5-second gap. No intervening entries. No power fluctuation warnings. No communication errors. Nothing. Just a void. I double-checked the timestamp on the control room monitor. 14:48. Perfectly synchronized with the building's master clock, which was also displayed on a large digital readout above the server racks. I pulled up the hallway camera feed for the 12th floor, setting it to play back from just before 14:32. The time stamped on the video feed was continuous, counting off every second. At 14:32:15, the footage showed a brief flicker in the hallway lights, then a few people approaching the elevator bank, realizing Car 3 was stuck and moving to another car. The hallway clock in the corner of the video feed never skipped a beat. This wasn't a simple clock drift. The elevator system's internal clock, which usually mirrors the BMS master clock, had effectively paused its logging for over 3 minutes while the rest of the world kept time. I made a mental note to check the system's internal time server synchronization when I got the car running. Sometimes a bad network packet can cause a hiccup, but never a clean, unlogged gap like this. I dismissed it for the moment as a unique software glitch. My priority was the passengers. By the time I reached the 12th floor, building security had already managed to get the 2 trapped passengers out. They'd been stuck for about 15 minutes total, they estimated. One of them, a woman, looked shaken. "It just stopped with a jolt," she told the security officer. Then the lights flickered, and it got really cold in there, like a freezer. And the doors just wouldn't open. The security officer gave her a sympathetic nod, probably thinking she was exaggerating the cold. I just listened, my mind on the log gap. I took the stairs to the 13th floor and accessed the hoistway. Car 3 was indeed hanging about halfway between the 12th and 13th floors, its top just visible below the 13th floor landing. I set up my portable work light and descended onto the cab roof. Everything looked normal. No frayed cables, no damaged door mechanisms, no obvious issues with the interlocks. The emergency stop button on the cab roof was in the run position. The door operator seemed fine. I pulled out my laptop and connected directly to the cab controller. The diagnostic scan showed no active faults. The door lock circuit tested within parameters. It was as if the door lock fail had never happened, or had resolved itself without intervention. My initial thought was a transient electrical spike, something that momentarily confused the system but left no lasting trace. Then I remembered the passenger's comment about the cold. I knew this building had a cab roof camera, part of the building's integrated security system, separate from the elevator's operational logging. It's usually there to monitor passenger behavior or for emergency situations, pointed into the cab through the glass observation panel above the doors. I radioed the control room operator. "Can you pull up the Car 3 roof cam feed for the incident time?" "From 14:30 to 14:40. "Got it," the operator responded. "Playing it back now on monitor 4. "Anything specific I'm looking for?" "Just let it run," I said, my voice crackling over the radio. I climbed back to the 13th floor landing, my boots crunching faintly on the concrete. I wanted to see this myself. A few minutes later, I was back in the control room, staring at monitor 4. The footage showed the two passengers inside the cab. At 14:32:15, the lights flickered, and the car juddered to a halt. The passengers looked around, confused. Then, slowly, impossibly, a fine layer of white frost began to spread across the inside surface of the cab's glass observation panel, directly in front of the camera lens. It wasn't a thin mist, it was a visible, crystalline coating, like a window on a sub-zero morning. It thickened, obscuring the view into the cab, making the passengers' faces hazy. The interior temperature of the cab, according to the BMS sensors, remained a steady 72 degrees Fahrenheit. There was no way frost could form inside a climate-controlled elevator cab. The frost remained for the entire duration of the log gap. At 14:35:20, precisely when the elevator logs resumed with "door lock restored," the frost on the glass shimmered, then vanished completely, as if wiped away by an invisible hand. The cab lights flickered again, and the doors slowly hissed open. The passengers, looking disoriented, stepped out. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach, far colder than any frost. The control room operator, who had been quietly watching, turned to me, his face pale. What was that?" "I don't know," I said, my voice tight. "Run that diagnostic protocol again. The full system integrity check for Car 3. This protocol was supposed to reinitialize every component, resync all timing mechanisms, and report any anomalies. It was a deep dive, usually reserved for persistent, unresolvable issues. The diagnostic initiated. A progress bar appeared on the screen, crawling slowly. It reached about 60%, then stalled. "System hang," the display flashed. I tried again. Same result. The protocol, designed to verify the integrity of the system, simply refused to complete. It couldn't process whatever fundamental contradiction was now embedded in Car 3. It was like trying to debug a program that had skipped a crucial chunk of its own execution. My supervisor arrived, a grizzled veteran named Miller, who'd seen every elevator malfunction imaginable. I walked him through the logs, the continuous hallway clock, the impossible frost footage, the failed diagnostic. He leaned in close to the monitor, his brow furrowed, then ran a hand over his bald head. "Firmware glitch," he muttered, but his eyes betrayed his doubt. "Or maybe a sensor malfunction, giving us bad data." "The frost wasn't a sensor malfunction," I countered. "It was on camera, inside the cab. And the log gap, Miller. 3 minutes, clean, unlogged. While the rest of the building kept time." He sighed, running his fingers through his thinning hair. "We can't keep a car out of service indefinitely without a clear, explainable fault tech. The diagnostic isn't reporting anything specific. If it won't even run the full test, we can't force it." I remembered a small, old hydraulic unit I once worked on, 20 years ago, in a 3-story apartment building. You could hear the oil pump whirring, feel the slow, deliberate ascent. Simple, mechanical, predictable. This modern system, with its layers of digital complexity, felt alien and hostile. The supervisor decided. "Clear the fault, put it back in service. Monitor it closely. If anything else happens..." My career as a facilities engineer spans 15 years, most of it dedicated to the sprawling campus of a major university in the Northeast. My responsibilities cover everything from HVAC systems to structural integrity, and it demands a comprehensive understanding of every pipe, wire, and foundation on the property. I rely on detailed blueprints, digital schematics, and a range of tools. Thermal imagers, multi-gas detectors, even ground-penetrating radar when needed. Safety protocols are paramount. Lockout-tagout procedures, confined space entry permits, and hazard assessments are second nature. It was late autumn, the air crisp with the promise of winter, and I was performing the annual shutdown and winterization of the outdoor aquatic center. This involves draining lines, securing pumps, and, crucially, isolating the heating loop that runs from the main boiler room. The boiler room itself is a labyrinth of steel and copper, a constant hum of machinery. I was checking the primary supply lines for the pool, tracing their path along a section of the east wall, when I felt it. A warm draft. It wasn't a subtle wisp. This was a distinct, steady breath of warm air, emanating from a section of the wall that should have been solid. I ran my hand over the cinder blocks, then the older, rougher brickwork beneath them. The draft was strongest near an old, bricked-up archway, barely visible behind a tangle of disused conduit. The archway itself was filled in with a patchwork of mismatched bricks, clearly an older modification. But the mortar looked sound. My first thought was a breach in an unmapped utility tunnel, a common issue in buildings this old. But the campus maintains an exhaustive record. Every utility tunnel, every crawl space, every sub-basement access point is meticulously documented, cross-referenced between the original paper blueprints from the 1920s and our modern digital mapping system. This mapping is our core protocol, the bedrock of our safety and operational efficiency. An unmapped void is a serious liability, a potential conduit for anything from water leaks to gas accumulation, or worse. I pulled out my thermal imager. The brickwork directly in front of the archway glowed a faint orange, confirming the heat source. The draft itself registered at 85 degrees Fahrenheit, significantly warmer than the ambient 68 degrees in the boiler room. As I moved closer, I caught a scent, faint but distinct. a clean, earthy smell, like rain on hot asphalt after a summer storm. Petrichor, but out of place in a dry mechanical space. I spent the next hour poring over every map and schematic I could find for this section of the campus. The boiler room, the pool lines, the adjacent service corridors, all accounted for. But the bricked archway? Nothing. It was a blank spot, a ghost on the blueprints. This was a violation of the most fundamental rule of campus infrastructure. Everything must be known, everything mapped. I reported the anomaly to my supervisor. Unmapped archway, active thermal signature, significant warm air draft, I stated, keeping it strictly factual. The supervisor, a veteran himself, understood the implications immediately. He authorized a careful, non-destructive investigation, emphasizing strict adherence to all confined space and unknown hazard protocols. The next morning, I returned with the junior technician. We set up our gear: a multi-gas detector, a more powerful thermal imager, a fiber optic scope, and breaching tools. We initiated lockout-tagout on the nearby steam lines and electrical conduits, even though they appeared cold and dead. The brickwork of the archway was old, the mortar surprisingly crumbly. A few careful taps with a hammer and chisel, and we dislodged the first few bricks. Behind them, darkness, and the warm air, now stronger, carrying that distinct, rain-like scent. The temperature reading jumped to 92 degrees. I deployed the fiber optic scope. The view was limited by dust and debris, but it showed a brick-lined corridor, surprisingly intact, stretching into the gloom. Before any further entry, I deployed the multi-gas detector. Oxygen levels were normal, no carbon monoxide, no hydrogen sulfide. But the VOC, volatile organic compound sensor, showed a persistent, low-level elevation. Not dangerous, but unusual for a seemingly sealed space. I felt a surge of confidence. The air was breathable, no immediate danger. "Looks clear for a preliminary visual," I told the technician. "I'll just step inside the opening. You monitor the gas and comms." It was a minor deviation from protocol, a quick, just inside, without a full two-person entry. A small mistake, born of overconfidence in the initial readings. I squeezed through the opening. The tunnel was wider than it appeared from the scope, about 6 feet across and 7 high. It ran straight west, exactly where an old, incomplete map fragment from the 1930s might have indicated a service corridor if it hadn't abruptly ended. My headlamp cut through the darkness, illuminating the rough red brick walls. The heat was immediate, oppressive. My thermometer read 98 degrees. The air was thick, humid, and the petrichor smell was now intense, almost cloying. I walked perhaps 20 feet. Along one wall I saw a line of old, rusted iron pipes, likely for water or steam, but they were cold to the touch. The heat wasn't coming from them. It seemed to emanate from the air itself, and from the brickwork that glowed a dull orange on my thermal imager further down the tunnel. I noticed a single, perfectly preserved, desiccated oak leaf stuck to the brick wall, far from any opening. It seemed impossible it could have drifted so far into a sealed, unmapped space. I continued deeper. Another 30 feet. The heat continued to climb. My thermometer now read 105 degrees, then 110. The air was heavy, humid, almost tropical, and the smell of rain was overwhelming, like standing in a steam room filled with geosmin. I remembered playing in my grandmother's old cellar as a child. The cool, damp smell of earth and stored potatoes. This was the inverse. A hot, humid, wrong smell. Then, the multi-gas detector clipped to my belt started to chirp erratically. The VOC reading spiked, then dropped. Then the oxygen sensor briefly flickered a low O2 warning before returning to normal. It repeated this cycle, a frantic, inconsistent dance of numbers. My comms crackled. "Readings are all over the place, engineer." The technician's voice was tight with concern. "Oxygen fluctuating. VOCs spiking hard. You need to come out." The protocol failed. My initial confidence was shattered. The gas detector was either malfunctioning wildly, or the environment was unstable and dangerous. My quick visual had turned into a risky penetration of an unknown, thermally active, and chemically unstable space. The supervisor's words about safety protocols echoed in my mind. This was beyond a simple utility repair. I retreated, feeling disoriented and slightly nauseous from the heat and the strange, cloying smell. The tunnel was resealed, the archway marked with hazard tape and a temporary no entry sign. I submitted my report, detailing the unmapped corridor, the extreme and unexplained thermal anomaly, and the erratic gas readings. Plans were drawn up for a full, properly equipped hazmat entry, but the sheer cost and logistical nightmare of investigating a thermally active, unmapped tunnel with unknown atmospheric conditions meant it kept getting pushed back. To this day, the heat signature remains, a constant orange glow behind the bricked archway in the boiler room, breathing its warm, rain-scented air into the campus infrastructure. A place that shouldn't exist, whose heat source remains a mystery, humming beneath our feet. For 7 years, I've overseen the residential assistant teams and managed the electronic access systems across our university's main campus. My nights are often spent in the glow of monitors, sifting through door logs, cross-referencing security camera feeds, and responding to the mundane. Forgotten keycards, locked-out residents, the occasional late-night noise complaint. The digital infrastructure is robust, designed for redundancy, and generally, it's as predictable as the sunrise. Every swipe, every attempted entry, every exit is logged, time-stamped, and tied to a unique credential. It's a system I trust implicitly, a digital fortress around thousands of young lives. This particular Tuesday started like any other. The winter break had just ended, and the dorms were slowly refilling. Most of the RA staff were still getting back into the swing of things, so I took the overnight shift, a habit from my early days. Around 0317, the system dashboard flagged a minor network hiccup. A brief, campus-wide connectivity drop. Less than 5 minutes. It happens. Usually, it's a router rebooting or a power flicker in one of the auxiliary buildings. I made a mental note to check the core server logs in the morning, but didn't think much of it. The main security functions, the door locks themselves, are hardwired to fail secure, meaning they remain locked in a power outage. The real anomaly surfaced just after 0600, as I was preparing to hand over to the day supervisor. I was doing a final sweep of the access logs, specifically looking for any unusual activity during the network blip. My eyes scanned the green text scrolling against the dark terminal. Most entries were expected. RAs doing rounds, early morning student-athletes heading to practice. Then, a line caught my attention. 031601, redacted dorm, 5th floor, room 512, access granted. Credential, redacted ID. 031615, redacted dorm, 5th floor, room 512, access granted. Credential, redacted ID. The credential ID was immediately recognizable. It belonged to a student who had passed away unexpectedly over the winter break. Their room, 512, had been cleared out by family just before the new semester, and the keycard associated with that ID had been formally deactivated and retired from the system weeks ago. It was standard protocol. Once a student leaves, voluntarily or otherwise, their digital access is revoked. A retired credential cannot, under any circumstances, generate an access granted ping. It should register as access denied if someone tried to use it, or ideally, nothing at all since the card itself was physically surrendered. I blinked, rubbing the fatigue from my eyes. A glitch, I thought. Maybe the system hadn't fully processed the deactivation before the network hiccup. I pulled up the student's record again. Deactivation date, January 7th. Today was January 26th. Plenty of time for the system to synchronize. My first step was to verify the log entries. I cross-referenced the unique credential ID against the physical card number. It matched. The system was reporting that that specific card, the one belonging to the deceased student, had been used twice, 15 seconds apart, to open room 512. My stomach tightened. The air in the office, usually a sterile blend of recycled air and ozone, suddenly felt heavy. Next, I tried to pull the camera footage for the fifth-floor hallway, specifically for the time window surrounding 0316. The camera system is usually rock solid. Every hallway, every entrance, every common area has redundant feeds. I navigated to the camera interface, selected the dorm, the floor, the time. The screen flickered, then returned a message. Error. No data available for selected time frame.
System offline. 3:16:30 to 3:21:12. The network hiccup. It had taken down the camera feed for that exact period. A coincidence that felt too precise. The pings happened before the camera system went offline. This meant if someone had used the card, the camera should have captured it. But the system was just showing static for that entire duration. It was like trying to catch smoke. I called the day supervisor, waking them up earlier than planned. Their voice was groggy, but sharpened quickly as I laid out the details. I'm heading to the server room, I told them. Something's not right with the timestamp on the outage, or the logs themselves. The server room is in the basement of the administration building. A controlled environment kept at a constant 68 degrees Fahrenheit. The hum of the racks is usually a comforting white noise, a testament to the thousands of processes running smoothly. As I descended the concrete steps, the smell of dust and old wiring was stronger than usual. I checked the environmental monitors first. A quick glance at the temperature, humidity, power draw. Everything seemed nominal. My earlier fatigue had caused me to skip a detailed check of these during the initial network hiccup. A small oversight I regretted now. I logged into the primary access control server. The system logs confirmed the network outage. The timestamp read 3:16:30. The system had gone completely dark. Every sensor, every camera, every network connection severed for 4 minutes and 42 seconds. But the door pings were logged at 3:16:01 and 3:16:15. A full 19 and 15 seconds before the system outage began. It was a paradox. How could a system log an event at 3:16:01, then go offline at 3:16:30, and only report that log entry once it came back online at 3:21:12? The logs should have ceased at the exact moment of the outage. Events that happen during an outage aren't logged until the system recovers, if at all, and they are always stamped with the time of recovery, or at least a flag indicating an estimated time. These were precise,
pre-outage timestamps. I pulled up the raw data, bypassing the user interface, going straight to the core database. The entries were there, immutable. 2 access granted events for the deceased student's retired credential at room 512 on the 5th floor. Both stamped before the system went dark. It was as if the system had recorded these events, then held on to them, waiting for the exact moment of its own collapse to release them into the main log. I remembered a summer evening, years ago, after a particularly long shift, sitting on the common area balcony, watching the campus lights come on. The quiet hum of new beginnings. It felt a world away from the cold, clinical contradiction I was facing now. The day supervisor arrived, their face grim as I showed them the screen. We double-checked everything. We ran diagnostics on the door reader itself, on the network switch for that floor. All reported normal operation. The door reader on room 512 was functioning perfectly. There was no physical damage, no sign of forced entry. We walked the 5th floor hallway. The air was still and cool. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting long, stark shadows. Room 512's door was solid, locked. The small red light on the card reader was dark, indicating no recent activity. I pressed my palm against the cold metal of the door. Nothing. No residual warmth, no vibration. Just an empty room, sealed tight. The system reported a ghost. A credential, officially dead and buried, had seemingly stirred, opened a door, and then vanished, leaving only an impossible timestamp and a void where camera footage should have been. The supervisor and I stood in the quiet hallway, the impossible logs echoing in our minds. We filed a report, detailing every step, every contradiction. But the logs remained, a digital whisper of something that shouldn't exist, forever stamped into the university's secure history. A minute before everything went dark. I am a meteorology student, currently in my 3rd year, and a certified storm spotter for the Regional Weather Service. My dorm room, a corner unit on the 3rd floor, offers an unobstructed view to the east and south. This makes it ideal for monitoring weather events, especially during severe storm season. My setup is modest but effective. A laptop running real-time weather models, a calibrated portable barometer, an anemometer mounted to the exterior window frame, and a wideband infrasound recorder. I've logged dozens of watches and warnings from this very spot, relaying data to the local weather office when ground truth is needed. The evening of October 17th began like many others. A tornado watch had been issued for our county until midnight. Rain had started around 1900 hours, a steady drumming sheet against the windows, accompanied by a consistent wind from the southeast, gusting to about 25 knots. My barometer showed a slow, steady drop, typical for an advancing low-pressure system. I was logging readings every 15 minutes, cross-referencing with the radar loop on my screen. The air in the room felt heavy, charged. I remember thinking how different it felt from the crisp, clear autumn day just a week prior, when I'd sat outside the library, the sun warm on my face, studying for an atmospheric dynamics exam. Around 22:30, the wind picked up noticeably. My anemometer registered gusts closer to 35 knots. The rain intensified, blurring the streetlights below into halos. I noted a slight, almost imperceptible dip on my portable barometer, a momentary fluctuation of about 0.5 millibars. I logged it as a potential microburst artifact, or even just instrument drift, a common occurrence with portable units in high humidity conditions. It wasn't significant enough to warrant immediate concern based on my training, which prioritizes sustained pressure drops and correlating visual cues. This was my first mistake, dismissing a subtle, localized anomaly. My eyes drifted to the east-facing windows. They were double-paned, latched securely, and the heavy-duty vinyl blinds were drawn. Despite the latches, despite the inward pressure from the strong wind, the blinds began to breathe. They didn't just rattle or bow outward. They drew inward, a slow, deliberate suction, then released. It was like watching a lung expand and contract, a silent, rhythmic motion against the backdrop of the storm. The movement was too uniform, too controlled for a simple wind gust. I pushed myself up from my desk, walked over, and pressed my palm against the glass. It felt solid. The latches were engaged, no air leaked in. The blinds, however, continued their strange, synchronized movement. Then I heard it. A low, resonant tone, not quite audible, more like a vibration felt in the chest. It rode the room, a deep hum that seemed to emanate from the very walls, like a heavy-duty truck idling just outside. Yet there was nothing but rain and wind beyond the glass. This was infrasound, a frequency below the range of human hearing, but often felt as a pressure. My training emphasized that significant infrasound often precedes or accompanies tornadic activity. But this was different. It felt internal, contained within the room, almost as if the room itself was resonating. My protocol for severe weather observation is clear. Identify visual cues, confirm with instrumentation, log, and report. But here, the visual cue of the blinds moving inward contradicted the expected external pressure from the wind. My barometer, after that initial dismissed dip, showed a steady, if slightly accelerated, decline, consistent with the passing storm front, not the extreme pressure fluctuations I'd expect to cause such an internal effect. The hum persisted, a deep, unsettling thrum. I decided to deploy my infrasound recorder. It was a standard, off-the-shelf unit, modified with a custom low-frequency microphone. I set it on my desk, aimed generally towards the eastern windows, and hit record. The time was 22:47. The air in the room grew colder, despite the central heating, and I could smell the faint, almost clinical scent of industrial disinfectant wafting up from the hallway, probably from the late-night cleaning crew. It was a mundane detail, but it stood out against the growing strangeness. The watch was lifted just after midnight. The rain tapered off, and the wind died down to a gentle breeze. The hum faded, and the blinds settled back into stillness. Exhausted, I saved my logs, noting the unexplained atmospheric anomaly, and powered down my equipment. I didn't listen to the recording immediately. I was too tired, and frankly, a little shaken by the experience. The next morning, after a few hours of restless sleep, I pulled up the infrasound recording. The first few minutes were dominated by the low-frequency hum, a deep, almost guttural thrum that was much clearer on playback than it had been in person. I ran it through a basic spectral analysis program, looking for any identifiable patterns. The hum showed a consistent peak around 15 Hz, dipping occasionally. Then, around the 00312 mark, a spike. Not a sudden burst, but a distinct, almost human-like vocalization, buried deep within the hum. I isolated the segment, ran it through a noise reduction filter, and boosted the gain. It was faint, distorted, but unmistakably a voice. It was slow, deliberate, and seemed to be answering a question. I listened again, and again. The voice, a low male register, spoke a single, clear phrase. "It's already here." I had not spoken a word during the recording. No one else had been in the room. I played back the preceding minutes. Nothing. No question, no utterance, no sound that could have prompted such a response. The recording was clean of other voices, just the storm's ambient noise and that pervasive hum. My barometer logs showed a sharp, inexplicable pressure spike of nearly 2 millibars at 000315, after the blinds had stopped moving and the hum had faded. It contradicted all expected atmospheric behavior for the time. I still have that recording. I've played it for colleagues, for my professor. They've suggested everything from crosstalk interference to pareidolia, but no one can explain the pressure spike, or the blinds, or the context of the voice. The data doesn't align. My instruments recorded an event that defied the visible reality, and the recording captured a response to an unasked question. The incident remains logged in my personal records as unexplained infrasound anomaly, dormitory 307. I haven't been able to bring myself to delete the file. For 2 decades, I've been the facilities manager for the university, overseeing everything from the steam tunnels under the historic quad to the fiber optics lacing through our newest research labs. My background is in architectural conservation, with a master's in art history, so I've always appreciated the blend of old stone and cutting-edge tech that defines our campus. I know these buildings, every creak and hum, every renovation layer. The call came in at 2:17. General fire alarm, ground lounge, old arts building. It's a solid structure built 1908, with high ceilings and tall arched windows. Not prone to false alarms. I grabbed my thermal imager, my heavy-duty flashlight, and the master key ring. The night air was damp, smelling of cut grass and impending rain. When I arrived, the strobes were already flashing through the lounge windows, painting the interior in frantic red pulses. No smoke billowed from the doors, no distant sound of sirens yet, just the insistent shriek of the alarm panel. I keyed in, the heavy oak door swinging inward with a groan. The lounge was empty, bathed in the strobe's harsh light, the alarm's blare echoing off the polished linoleum floor and the high plaster walls. The air was cool, carrying the faint, clean scent of the overnight cleaning crew's solution. I moved directly to the pull station, located in a shallow alcove near the main entrance. It was tripped, the small plastic flag indicating activation. Standard procedure. Check the immediate vicinity for fire, smoke, heat. My thermal imager showed nothing beyond ambient room temperature. No scorch marks, no soot, no smoldering debris. I ran a gloved hand over the pull station housing, then the wall around it. No residue. No obvious fingerprints either, which was the first oddity. Most false alarms, especially in a student-heavy area, leave a clear set of prints. My initial thought was a prank, but a meticulous one. I logged the time and the lack of physical evidence. As I straightened up, my flashlight beam, cutting through the strobing red, caught something faint on the pale yellow paint directly behind the pull station. Not graffiti. Not a smudge. Thin, almost translucent lines. Chalk. Barely visible, but definitely there. They weren't random scribbles. My art history training immediately recognized a deliberate hand. Arcs. Segments of circles, forming a precise, almost geometric pattern. It was too subtle for a student prank, too exact. It looked like a technical drawing, or perhaps a layout. This was where my standard protocol for fire alarms began to fray. No fire, no cause, no fingerprints. The chalk marks, however, were a physical anomaly. I photographed them meticulously, noting their exact position relative to the pull station. The fire department arrived then, and after a quick walkthrough, they agreed. No fire, no threat. They reset the panel and the oppressive shriek died, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. The incident report would likely be filed as faulty sensor, a common enough catch-all for unexplained activations. Back in my office, with the photos of the chalk marks on my monitor, a memory surfaced. Not of the current incident, but of long afternoons during my undergrad years, sketching architectural details in that very lounge. The way the late autumn light used to rake across the worn floorboards, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. A quiet, contemplative space, far removed from the sharp, inexplicable lines now etched on its wall. I zoomed in on the chalk. The arcs were too perfect. They reminded me of something. After a few minutes, I remembered seeing a faded blueprint in the university archives, detailing an early 20th century renovation of the old arts building. Specifically, a plan for a temporary partition that had been erected in that lounge to create a smaller study alcove during the 1930s, removed decades ago. I pulled the digital scan. My breath hitched. The chalk arcs on the wall behind the fire pull station aligned perfectly with the ghost footprint of that long-gone partition. Not just generally, but with an almost uncanny precision, as if someone had traced the exact location of its base plates, the curves of its corners. It wasn't just chalk. It was a blueprint, redrawn onto the wall, marking the precise boundaries of something that no longer physically existed. My next step was to review the security camera footage for the lounge, which covered the alcove. The timestamp was 02:15:32, approximately 2 minutes before the alarm activated. The lounge was empty. The camera offered a wide shot, showing the pull station clearly. I watched, frame by frame. Nothing. The room was still. I was about to dismiss it, thinking the chalk was a separate, earlier incident, when at 2:16:01 it happened. A shadow, roughly hand-sized, distinct and opaque, moved across the frame. It wasn't cast by anything visible. There was no body, no object, no source of light moving. It simply was. It traversed the space, a dark, featureless shape, passing directly over the fire pull station. As it crossed, a faint flicker, almost imperceptible, registered on the pull station's indicator light. Then, the strobes in the lounge instantly flared. The alarm panel in the corner lit up, and the sound cut out from the camera feed as the system went live. The shadow continued its path, uninterrupted, reaching the edge of the frame, and then simply vanished. I replayed the clip. 10 times. 20. Each time the same sequence. The empty room, the shadow appearing, moving, triggering the alarm, then disappearing. There was no glitch in the footage, no lens flare, no dust on the sensor. It was a coherent, moving entity, acting with intent. It had no body. It left no fingerprints. But it had activated the fire alarm. The official report remained sensor malfunction, cause undetermined. There was no way to explain the footage, no protocol for a hand-sized shadow with no discernible source. But I knew. The chalk marks, precise and deliberate, outlining a structure that had been absent for generations. The shadow moving with a purpose, interacting with the system. The building felt different now, especially that alcove. Colder somehow. Heavier. I still respond to calls in the old arts building, but I find myself avoiding the lounge after dusk, and I never look directly at the wall behind the pull station anymore. I've been a maintenance supervisor for this campus for 17 years. Most of that time has been spent dealing with the mundane. Leaky pipes, flickering ballasts, HVAC units that decide to seize up on the hottest day of summer. My territory covers 3 major buildings in the downtown core, all brick and steel, ranging from 40 to 60 years old. My day starts before sunrise, usually around 4:30, with a walkthrough. It's a quiet time, just me and the security patrol checking the perimeter, ensuring all access points are secure. It's routine, almost meditative, especially in the pre-dawn cool. My standard operating procedure, the core protocol I rely on, is that a secure building remains secure. Every door, every window, every roof hatch is logged and checked. If a seal is broken, it's immediate action. We don't tolerate unauthorized access. This isn't just about property. It's about the confidential work done inside these walls. On a Tuesday in late spring, the morning air was still holding the chill of the night, but the eastern sky was already bleeding into orange and pink. I was on my final building, the old 8-story structure, working my way up the internal stairwell to the roof access. The building's age means its systems require constant vigilance. I remember one summer, maybe 10 years back, when the old water tower on the roof sprung a pinhole leak. Spent a whole weekend up there with a welder, the sun beating down, trying to patch it without draining the whole system. That kind of memory usually makes me smile. As I reached the top landing, the small, square roof hatch came into view. It was a heavy steel plate, designed to be secured from the inside with a stout bolt and a padlock. But this morning, the padlock was missing. The hatch itself was propped open, a narrow sliver of pre-dawn light cutting through the gap. It wasn't fully open, just enough for the chain to catch, leaving it hanging ajar. My first thought was that a gust of wind must have caught it. Maybe the lock wasn't properly set by the night crew. It was a minor mistake on my part, a momentary lapse in judgment to assume an environmental factor rather than an intentional act. I should have known better. I pulled out my radio. Control, this is Maintenance Supervisor, Unit 1. I have an unsecured roof hatch on Building 3. Requesting security sweep and immediate response to the roof. Copy, Maintenance Supervisor, Unit 2 en route. I waited at the top of the stairs, keeping my distance, until Unit 2, a younger officer named Miller, arrived. We ascended together. The air on the roof was crisp, carrying the faint, metallic scent of the city waking up. The hatch, still hanging on its chain, gave a small groan as a breeze pushed it slightly. Miller took point, weapon drawn, as we stepped out onto the gravel roof. The sun was just clearing the horizon, casting long shadows from the parapet walls and the various HVAC units. That's when we saw it. Tucked neatly against the south parapet, shielded from the direct line of sight from the hatch, was a small, organized camp. A dark green canvas tarp was laid out flat. On it sat a stainless steel thermos, a small, folded blanket, and a compact backpack. Miller cautiously approached, checking the thermos. It was still warm to the touch. Beside the camp, a length of climbing rope, maybe 50 feet, was coiled neatly. One end was secured to a robust anchor point, a heavy cast-iron drain pipe that ran down the side of the building, and the other end was draped over the top of the brick parapet, ready for descent. This wasn't a homeless person seeking shelter. This was someone who knew what they were doing, someone prepared. Miller called in his findings. Control, Unit 2. We have evidence of unauthorized occupation on the roof of Building 3. Appears to be a temporary camp, recently vacated. Rope staged for rappel. Security initiated a full building search, floor by floor, while Miller and I secured the roof. He photographed the scene. Under a small rock near the parapet, he found a stack of notebook pages, weighted down by a handful of metal washers. The pages were covered in dense, meticulous handwriting. Columns of numbers, diagrams of antenna arrays, and what looked like timestamps next to cryptic notes. It wasn't gibberish. It was data. Someone had been up here, observing, recording. We bagged the pages as evidence. The rope was secured, the hatch bolted and padlocked from the inside. The building was declared clear after a 2-hour sweep. No one was found. No other access points were compromised. It was like the individual had simply vanished into the morning air. Later that afternoon, I went back up to the roof to check the hatch and the parapet again. A standard follow-up. The rope was still secured. But as I approached the spot where the notebook pages had been found, a cold prickle ran down my spine. The small pile of pages, which had been photographed and logged by security, was significantly smaller. Most of them were gone. Only 3 or 4 pages remained, still weighted by the washers. I radioed control immediately. Maintenance Supervisor, Unit 1. I need Unit 2 back on the roof of Building 3. The evidence has been tampered with. Miller arrived quickly, his face grim. He confirmed it. The original evidence log and photos showed at least 15 to 20 pages. Now there were only 4. The area around the remaining pages showed no signs of forced entry, no disturbed gravel, no footprints other than our own from that morning. The hatch was still bolted and padlocked. The rope was still secured. The protocol had failed. We had secured the building, swept it, and yet someone had accessed the roof again after we had been there and removed evidence. This wasn't a simple break-in. This was a direct, calculated breach of our security, a demonstration of an ability to move unseen, unheard, and unhindered. We never caught the individual. The remaining pages were analyzed, but the information was too fragmented to make sense. We enhanced security, installed new cameras and alarms on the roof, but the incident left a lingering unease. It wasn't just that someone had been on the roof. It was that they had returned after we'd left, to retrieve their notes, without tripping a single alarm, without leaving a trace. It made me wonder what else they had observed, what else they had learned, and what they planned to do with that knowledge. The sunrise, once a symbol of a new, predictable day, now just reminds me of a hatch, a rope, and an unseen presence that moved through our defenses like smoke.